Hello, and for the first time this year, welcome to Care's Book Corner! Yay! You thought that you saw the last of me, but I'm back, baby.
3, 2, 1.
As always, I put a little bit of effort into coordinating my shirt with the theme of the video, and while you can't tell literally anything about my shirt, the reason why I decided to wear this one is because it is the newest thing that I own, and in the new year, I'm going to wear the newest thing that I own. That is the best I could do, because it's not like I have a shirt with all of the books that I read in 2024. We're gonna get right into it. As I do every year, here are my 2024 book superlatives. These are only voted on by me and me alone. So let's get into some reading stats. I read 45 books this year, which is a 22% increase on books that I read last year. The majority of the books that I read were romances, followed by contemporary fiction, then translated, and then just like random miscellaneous books that I read. I had a really good reading year. Let me summarize it by my book stats by stars. I had a 400% increase on 5-star books this year, because last year I had 0. This year, I had 4. Me reading 4 5-star books in a year is kind of crazy to me. I'm actually very pleased. None of the books that I read, I hated, so that's good. Every book that I read this year was at least average, which is honestly more than what I could ask for. Starting it off, let's judge books by their cover, because as you know, my favorite thing to do is to buy a book because the cover's pretty. The best title this year was Lunar Love. It's a really cute title for a romance book, especially one that's like centered around the Lunar New Year, the zodiac animals, and like all of that. I just think it's a really cute title. The book, on the other hand, I didn't really like. I really wanted to like this book because I thought the title was just so cute. The main character annoyed me quite a bit, so much so that every time I had to read the book, I would just be like, ugh, I'm already annoyed at her, and I haven't even opened the book yet. This book is about the main character. Her family has a matchmaking program, and she is going to inherit that. Her family's business is very focused on traditional Chinese zodiac culture and matching people based off of that, where her competitor is taking a modern approach, and it's more of a dating app type thing, and it's enemies to lovers, forbidden romance, I guess, maybe, I don't know. I feel like this book turned race into a plot point where it was very in your face at times about explaining Chinese culture, which I think is fine, but it's like, at least do it consistently or do it not at all. I appreciate the subtle, quiet parts of Asian culture, and I wrote in my review of this book did simultaneously too much and too little. I did not like the ending of this book. I think that this ending did not do the characters justice. I am talking way too much about this book. The best cover of the year is Tomb Sweeping. While I bought Lunar Love based off the title, I bought this one solely based off the cover because I saw it and I was like, this is really cute. If we're talking about subtle and quiet Asianness, this book is it. This book is a short story collection about honestly random things. It has Asian culture weaved into all of it, but it's just really random things. I like the writing style, and I feel like this is a very slice of life book laced with melancholy and ennui. That's about as good as I can get in terms of describing what this book is about, because also, since it's a short story collection, there's not a whole lot of plot in it. I'll just say I rated it 3 stars. I wish that this book was as cute as the cover was, but I did not like it as much. The stories that the book told weren't necessarily for me. The worst cover is Two Wrongs Make a Right. I don't think I really loved any covers, and I don't think I really hated any covers, but this is the one that I dislike the most. I feel like this book is giving romance, and I don't like my romance books giving romance. I want to be that mysterious little girl that you see reading a random book and you're like, wow, she looks super mysterious, but clearly if I read Two Wrongs Make a Right, you can see that it's a romance book and there's no mystery to that. This is a fake dating grumpy sunshine book. That's about all I could tell you about the book, if I'm being honest with you. In my review, I wrote that it lacked substance but still was a fun read. I rated it 3.25 stars, and that's all I got for you. Authors that I'm excited to read more of: Coco Malors. This is not the first time I mentioned this book on this channel, and it's not going to be the last, even in this video. I read Blue Sisters this year. I loved it. It just cemented Coco Malors as a auto-buy author for me. I will say that both of these books are messy and they're toxic and are for probably a selective audience. Read the trigger warnings before you read any of these books, but I love both of these books, so I'm excited to read anything else Coco Malors writes, because I just think that she writes with such honesty and rawness that makes me feel less alone. I feel like she writes the toxic and messy parts of people into all of her characters, and I can't help but just to want to read more of it. Moving on to the inside of books and the actual content. The most underrated book I read this year is I Hope This Finds You Well. This was another one of my 5-star reads. Shout out to the book club member for recommending this book to me. I loved this book. This book is basically a story of a character who gets in trouble with HR. It's basically her story of character development. I don't think that sells this book enough, but I thought this book was so funny. I thought this book was so cute. I thought this book was great. I love this book, and it just feels like all of the corporate tomfoolery and monkeying around that I do in my day-to-day life was just in this book, and I loved it. I feel like this book was just pure entertainment. I read this book in less than a day, which is very fast for me. The banter in this book is just so good, and I love that it was just like a subplot of romance. Oh, this book was so cute. I love this book. I would recommend this book wholeheartedly. I think it's such a funny book, especially if you are in the corporate world and you can relate to a lot of these stories. It made me want to complete a HR violation so I can go to HR and find love. It made me want to break some rules to see if maybe that's how I find love. Who knows? For legal purposes, I am not going to be committing any HR violations, but I love the friendship in this book. I love the character development. I love this book. I love it. The most overrated book that I read this year is Yellowface. This book is about an Asian author who dies, and this white author steals her manuscript and submits it as her own. This book is like reading a train wreck, and you can't look away. I was viscerally angry at this book, but I couldn't stop reading it, and I feel like maybe that's what a good book does, but for me, I was just so conflicted on whether or not I liked this book, and I landed somewhere in the middle. I think it does what a good book is supposed to do. It makes you feel things and think about things. I was so angry. For me, this felt like rage bait in a book. I think this is the most angry I've been while reading a book. Anger is not an emotion I experience so strongly very often. This book made me feel anger often. It has interesting commentary about race and the publishing industry and censorship, but this book just, oh, that's Yellowface. I rated it a 3.5 out of 5. I would say the most heartwarming book was Sweet Bean Paste that I read this year. This book was just really warm and cozy, and I love that it was 3 generations of people coming in to a unexpected friendship. This book is about this older lady who wants to work at this cafe restaurant type thing and make sweet bean paste. It's a second chance story for both her and the owner of that restaurant. This whole book was just talking about these 3 characters developing their friendships. It was just really heartwarming. It was just a nice little read that just made me feel cozy. And I also really like that food was a common thread. The most heartbreaking book I read this year was Please Look After Mom. This book broke my heart quietly, where it really made me question a lot of my relationships that I have with my parents, how difficult and heartbreaking being a mom is, and how a lot of times we don't think about who our parents were before they were our parents. This book really showed the humanization of our parents. Especially in my 20s, I have started to think about my parents as humans and my parents' life before they had kids and who they are outside of just being my parents. I read this book with my mom next to me a lot of the times because I was reading this when I was traveling with her in Korea this year. It made me just realize how grateful I am to have my parents as my parents. This book explored the honest and raw emotions of being a mom pretty well. This book is about this family whose mom gets lost at a train station and this family's journey on trying to find her. The book that made me know heartbreak is Better by Far. While I did have a good reading year, I feel like the common thread between all of my books this year is that it was just some type of heartbreaking. Like even my most heartwarming book, Sweet Bean Paste, also had a bit of heartbreak into it. And that's, I guess, just the books that I tend to like and gravitate towards. As someone who has never been in a relationship and never truly gotten their heart broken in a romantic sense, I will say that this book made me understand what that feels like. Because the way that Hazel Hayes writes about heartbreak is just so honest. You can definitely feel and put yourself into the main character's point of view, and you can feel that heartbreak with them. This book is about this couple. They go through a breakup. They switch off every week who lives in the apartment for the time being until they can find more permanent accommodations. I texted the cousin so many times while reading this book, just like pictures of one-liners and things that made me feel like I understood romantic heartbreak. If I read this book after getting my heart broken, I feel like this book would hit. This book would make me feel seen, would make me feel known, because it's not only the very obvious parts of going through a breakup, it's the small things where it's like an absence of them, like their toothbrush isn't where it used to be and things like that. Small things that hit you hard. This was not a fun read, but it was a good one. It's the reason why I read her next book, which I voted most toxic relationship. I think the characters were clearly not right for each other, but I rooted for them anyway, and that's what a good toxic relationship does, where you're clearly like, these characters aren't supposed to be together, but you're like, but aren't they? And this book is actually written very interestingly, where it's written in reverse chronological order, where you experience the breakup and then it tells you how they got there. I said this in my summer wrap-up book video. The whole time I was reading this book, the only thing I could think about was the lyric, "I can see the end as it begins" by Taylor Swift. I just feel like that encapsulates this book so well. I knew the characters weren't gonna work out. I knew that they weren't meant to be, but I'm falling in love with them as a couple. So what do you mean they don't work out? This author's writing style is very honest and raw and real, which is why I like it as well. The most toxic book in general that I read this year was Blue Sisters. I love the toxicity in this book, and I don't know what that says about me. This book belongs in a wasteland because of how toxic the characters and self-destructive they were. But God, do I love that. This book is about how this family of 4 sisters loses one of them tragically. The rest of them have to figure out who they are and what they're doing with their lives outside of their relationship with their sister, or I guess honoring their relationship with their sister. As I mentioned in why I love Coco Malore's writing, I just feel like these characters make you feel less alone. You probably can find something to relate to in all of these characters. It made me feel less alone in my toxicity, whatever that tells you. I don't know. I love this book, but like I said, read the trigger warnings before reading this book. But I loved this book. I love the sibling dynamics. I loved how messy the family was. I love how real the relationship between the sisters were. They were all trying to figure it out together. I feel like this book is perfect for people who are trying to figure out who they are. I love these books. I love this book so much. The most unique book I read was The Husbands. This book was about this girl who comes home and sees a random man in her house. And she's like, who is this man? She checks her phone and figures out that she's actually married to this man. Every time one of these men go up into the attic, a new one comes out. Her husband's keeps getting switched out. I think that this was an interesting idea, but it had a very average execution. I just didn't necessarily like the book. I feel like this book was repetitive. It didn't really do anything new. And I thought that this book was going to be a lot more interesting and say a lot more about love and the experience of finding love. As you can tell, that's basically all I could think about this book. I have a bullet point there that's blank because I'm like, I don't know what else to say. The most out of the box book that I read and liked was A Psalm for the Wild Built. I thought this book was just honestly so cute. The reason why this is the most out of the box book that I read this year was because it was sci-fi, and I typically don't read sci-fi. Like, my box is, as you can tell by my reading genres, romance and contemporary fiction and translated literature. Sci-fi is not really part of that box. Shout out to the bookstore employee who recommended this to me, because without that person, I never would have even thought to read this book. I love the unlikely friendship that developed between the characters. I loved how quick, easy, fun, light, cozy this book was. Overall, really enjoyed this book. I am excited to read the second one, which the book club member mentioned to me she liked as well. A Psalm for the Wild Built is a book based in a future where robots are commonplace and humans are also commonplace, but we made an agreement robots and humans are not going to interact. This story is basically about a monk who goes into the wild, sees a robot, and their unexpected friendship. The most out of the box book that should have stayed out of the box is Revenge. I read The Memory Police by the same author, and I saw this when I was in Japan. Bought it because I base my book purchases solely off of the cover. I genuinely cannot tell you a lot about it, but I do remember that it was deeply unsettling for me. In my review, I literally wrote, this book was deeply unsettling. And I couldn't tell you why, so maybe I was just so traumatized by this book that I blocked it out. I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember that all of the stories were somehow intertwined. The higher level concept and thought of the book was interesting, and a lot of it was heartbreaking, but it was all written with a dark undertone, which just may have scarred me. So much so that I just blocked out all of this book. The smuttiest book I read this year was Wild Love. I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember that I thought it was cute, but also very smutty. While reading this book, I was just like, this book is so dirty, I'd probably have to stop and take showers because of how dirty I felt after reading this book. I'm not a huge smut reader. I'm more of, I love the connection between characters versus a physical connection. While reading this book, I just was like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to read you all boinking. I just want to move on and talk about the lovey-dovey, cute little banter stuff because I'm just a silly little girl. And I will say that this book is just like your typical romance book. With that said, am I going to be reading the next book in the series? Maybe. It's on Kindle Unlimited, so it's like I have it. I could read it. Do I want to? I don't know. The most disappointing book that I read this year was a novel love story. I was so excited to read this book because I love The 7-Year Slip by the same author. I feel like the cover was cute, the premise of the story was cute. It was like magical realism where the main character found herself in the setting of her favorite book series. She could talk to all the characters, and I feel like that's a really interesting premise, but I feel like the execution was really lackluster. I honestly could not for the life of me understand why these characters liked each other. Like the main love interest, I don't understand how they ended up in a relationship because I didn't feel any type of connection between them. I really didn't. This book disappointed me in almost every way that it could, where I love a romance with a connection between the main love interests. I love a romance with good banter. I love a romance that has a little bit of trauma. This book didn't have a lot of trauma. This book didn't have any connection between the main love interests, and this book didn't have very good banter. With all that said, I still rated a 3.75 because I thought the book was cute. Again, I just really liked the premise, so I was like, we can forgive some. I really loved the prominence of friendship in this book, where the main character thought a lot about her best friend. I think a lot about my best friend. You can tell the main character really loves her friends. The most unforgettable book that I read this year was The Dollar Gut Dream Department Store. I picked this book up because I saw the cover say, "The dream that you ordered is sold out." And as someone who really believes in the meaning of dreams, and I really read into my subconscious a whole lot, where if I have this one dream and I'm like, what does that actually mean? Like, what is that telling me about myself? Like, I am that type of person. This book kind of reaffirmed that in a way and fed my delusions, where this book is about this department store that sells dreams. The whole thing about this department store is that it doesn't necessarily give you what type of dreams that you're wanting and expecting, but it's giving you the dreams that it thinks that you need. I love that. I love the premise of that book. This book is light, it's whimsical, it was a fun little cheeky little read. I liked little Easter eggs that it had, and I'm really excited to read the second one, which I don't know when it comes out in America. I'm pretty sure it's already out in Korea. I am so excited because I just love the meaning of dreams. I just love the concept of dreams in general. I just really like this book, and I think it's like unforgettable in the way where regardless of how long it's been since I've read this book, I will still remember the high level idea of this book and how much this book talked about the meaning of dreams, and that will always just stick with me. The most forgettable is My Favorite Half Nightstand, and I could not tell you what this book was about. I read my review I wrote about this book. I still couldn't tell you what the plot was. I wrote nothing about the plot in my book review. I literally just wrote how it disappointed me, and it hurts me to say because I typically like Christina Lauren's books. As you can tell by that book up in the corner, one of my favorite books is Love in Other Words, written by the same author, and I had really high hopes for My Favorite Half Night Stand because it's written by the same people. I don't know what it was about, so I couldn't even tell you whether or not I liked it or disliked it. I just could tell you I don't remember it, which means probably it's just like your average romance book. I want to summarize this book to tell you what it's about, but I genuinely could not tell you. I feel like you may think that I'm doing a bit because it's the most forgettable, but genuinely, I cannot remember it. I read the Goodread synopsis of this book before this video. I was like, I don't remember reading this book. I know I read it because this was like a blind date with a book that I got this year, but I couldn't tell you about it. And I'm so bummed because I love Christina Lauren. Here we are. I tried not to repeat books for each superlative, but I think A Psalm for the Wild Built, honestly, deserves to be repeated because it truly is a book that I expected to dislike but liked. When the bookstore employee was like, "Oh, you should buy this book," I was like, I have to read a science fiction? Okay, I guess. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to read this. On the surface, this book did not sound interesting to me at all, but I ended up really liking it and I thought it was really cute. That's the magic of books. A book that I expected to like but disliked. And like I said, because I feel like this year was just such a good reading year for me, I didn't necessarily dislike this book, but I didn't like this book as much as I thought I would. This book was one of the most hyped books of this year. I feel like a lot of book influencers were talking about this book, and it's also like a book about unrequited love. Because I'm masochistic, I just love reading about because that's the only love that I have in my life so far. I feel like I didn't understand this book enough to really enjoy it. Maybe my brain just wasn't all there when I was reading this, but I know it was well written. I can understand the hype around this book. I just personally did not enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to. This book can basically be summarized by saying a dude gets his heart broken twice and friend zoned. The best book to bring on a dessert deserted island is The Last Chance Library. This is another one of my 5-star reads. As you can tell, I really love this book. I just think it's so cute and it's so wholesome and it's so warm and it's so cozy. It's the best book to bring to a deserted island because I feel like the cast of characters is just so good, where it feels like there are different people with you on that island, and like it'll bring you comfort and friendships and laughs and cries. You'll be like, why do I even need to leave this island? I have a whole group of friends right with me. I love this book. This book was just so heartwarming and really goes to show the importance of libraries. There's this Instagram page that sometimes comes up on my feed that's basically just talking about library stories, and if I find the page, I will put it up somewhere. The person always just says stories about like cute little things that happen in public libraries to go to show that the library is an important place for people to just exist and just be and not be judged. Everyone belongs in the library. And another one of the books that I liked, what you're looking for is in the library, because I'm a true believer in you'll read the right books at the right times. And sometimes you'll read a book that you'll really have needed and not even know. And this book is just so cute. And I love this romance subplot. The book most likely to make me jump off a pier in a good way is Funny Story. And the reason why I say this is because this book was just so dang cute that it made me want to jump off a pier because I'm so single. The banter was so good. It had me giggling. It had me kicking my feet. It had me wishing that I was gonna fall in love and have a love story like this. I would stop reading it and be like, oh, I'm so single. I love the friendship in this book. I love the slow burn. I love the yearning. It's just all so good. The moment I finished reading this book, I wanted to just start it all over, but I knew that I couldn't because I would not experience it the same way. This book is about two characters who both of their significant others break up with them because they start dating each other. Both of them become roommates because they both need a place to stay, and it's just their story. And I think it's just so cute, and I just love how golden retriever the main character is, and I love this book. I love this book wholeheartedly. It's just so good. The banter is just so good. That brings us to the end of my superlatives for this year. And as always, I break my best books into 3 buckets: romance, nonfiction, and contemporary fiction. My favorite romance that I read this year, no doubt about it, Funny Story. As I have been gushing for the past couple of minutes, love this book. This takes the cake as my favorite romance book this year because of how good the banter was. I am nothing if not a banter person. This book had banter. This book had trauma. This book had everything that I love. I could feel the slow burn and the connection between the main characters, and that's really all that I asked for. My favorite nonfiction could not be found because I read multiple nonfictions this year, but I did not like any of them. It's not like I disliked them, it's just that I didn't like them enough for me to say that it was the best book of this year. The highest I rated a nonfiction this year was like 3.75. For me, that is not a high rating. My favorite contemporary fiction is Blue Sisters. I feel like I was torn between Blue Sisters and I Hope This Finds You Well. Blue Sisters won out for me because of the familial aspect of it. I think about Blue Sisters more than I think about I Hope This Finds You Well. I Hope This Finds You Well is a fun read. Blue Sisters is not necessarily a fun read, but one that I enjoyed nonetheless. Every time I see Blue Sisters, I'm like, I love that book. I don't know what's wrong with me because it's like, do I like toxicity? Probably. Seems like it. The fact that my favorite romances have a little bit of trauma, a little bit of toxicity. My favorite books have a little toxicity. And what a way to just bring in the new year. Am I right? And that brings me to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any ideas for next year's superlatives, or if you want to share your favorite book of this year, your least favorite book of this year, I would love to know. So leave them in the comments below. I want to thank you all for all of last year, and your support means the world to me. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't already and you want to, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe down below. And I will see you in the next one. Bye. You for watching. Bye byes. It's truly been a while since I've had this like whole mic camera action setup. Hopefully all this worked because I don't know how I did this last year. Every year it's changed except for this year. I tried to keep it consistent because honestly doing this in my living room with the TV just seemed like a lot of work. Dude, I have been trying to get through this single nonfiction that I have been reading for the past like week or 2 weeks, and I am a little over 50%. And I was hoping to finish that book by the time I made this video today. I literally fell asleep reading that book last night. I fell asleep and then I like moved and my Kindle fell off of my bed and I was like, what was that? I didn't even realize that I was reading that book. How do I end this?